Welcome to Redacted Realms, where the shadows of history whisper their darkest truths. They told you history is written by the victors. They didn't tell you it's buried by the architects. Listen carefully, because what you're about to hear was never meant to reach your ears. It begins with 3 silent infants born in blood and candlelight, and ends with a revelation that will make you question every law of nature you thought was absolute. Picture this: February 1856, southeastern Ohio. A night so cold it froze the breath in your throat and turned every creaking timber into an omen. Snow drifted across an empty road leading to a modest Quaker meeting house. A building so unremarkable, so pure, no one suspected it of harboring the most dangerous secret in the state. Down in its hidden basement beneath plain wooden floors and a trapdoor camouflaged by pious simplicity, a woman labored alone. No cries, no screams, only silence and the faint sound of whispers in a language no midwife had ever heard. They weren't prayers, they weren't pleas for help. They were instructions to someone who had not yet drawn breath. Her name was Ruth, 19 years old, escaping chains not just of iron, but of bloodlines marked for extinction. She was supposed to give birth to 1 child, but when the night ended, there were 3 brothers born in complete silence while bounty hunters stalked just above their heads. 3 infants who never cried when men with guns and dogs walked across the floorboards, searching for flesh they could sell back into slavery. They didn't make a sound, not one. And when they finally did, hours later, after the danger had passed, their cries were in perfect unison, not random, not human, perfect, like a single voice divided into 3 bodies. You weren't supposed to know this. You weren't supposed to know that the Underground Railroad, heroic as it was, hid things far darker than fugitive slaves, things that could unmake the world if they were ever understood. And these children, they weren't a miracle, they were a message. From whom to whom? That is the question you'll keep asking as we descend further into the black river of history. They tried to dam but couldn't. Before we go deeper, I need to warn you, this is not a story you can simply listen to and walk away from. It changes you. Once you hear what these boys became and what they unleashed, you will never look at silence the same way again. Still here, good, then lean in, because the moment Ruth opened her eyes and whispered her last words, the clock began ticking on everything we know about human nature. Her last breath was not a blessing, it was a prophecy. They'll know things, she said. They'll always know. And then she was gone, leaving behind 3 identical sons staring at the world with eyes that seemed to hold too much knowledge. What I'm about to reveal isn't speculation. It's not campfire legend. These accounts come from journals buried for over a century, from letters burned in chimneys too late to stop the truth from spreading, and from men who lived long enough to wish they hadn't seen what they saw. You've been taught that evolution is slow, random, blind, a mistake crawling toward improvement over millions of years. But what if it isn't blind? What if every so often something interferes? 1856 was one of those times. And 3 brothers born in a basement while the law hunted for their mothers. Blood became something beyond explanation. Doctors tried to study them. Governments tried to track them. And when they couldn't understand them, they buried them. But secrets rot slowly. And tonight, we dig one up. This is the part where you pause. Let the silence breathe for 2 seconds, and then drop the descent line. You're about to learn why those who know the truth call them the children of knowing. And when I finish telling you this story, you'll ask yourself one question: if they existed, what else does? Now, let's go back to where it all began. Back to that meeting house, where faith and fear shared a roof, and where a young woman brought 3 sons into a world that wasn't ready for them. It started with a knock at the door, a signal, and a warning that would seal the fate of everyone inside. Here begins the next beat, where we recount the arrival of Joshua, the slave catchers closing in, and the night turning into something monstrous. The first knock was so soft that Joshua almost missed it. He was hunched by the hearth, feeding a stingy fire that refused to give warmth to the bones of the room. He'd been awake for 23 hours, long enough for the shadows in the corners to start whispering like old men with secrets, when the sound came again. 3 taps. A pause. To taps he froze, It wasn't a stranger's knock. It was the signal, the one that meant danger was coming fast and wearing boots. He turned toward the trapdoor in the floor. For a second, he thought about leaving it shut, pretending he hadn't heard, pretending he wasn't about to gamble his life on a girl who'd brought trouble the way winter brings death. But Joshua wasn't made for pretending. He crossed the room in 3 strides and dragged the rug aside, revealing the iron ring set into the planks. When he lifted it, the hinges screamed in protest, loud as a dying thing. Her eyes met his from below, wide and glassy in the flickering light. Ruth looked like something carved out of wax, her skin shining with sweat. Her hair clung to her skull in black ropes, and her teeth were clenched so tight he thought they might crack. In her lap, blood spread like ink through the blanket sheet, bunched around her waist. "They're coming," Joshua said. His voice sounded wrong and his own ears flat, like it had been pressed between stones. "We've got maybe 5 minutes." She didn't answer. Her gaze dropped to the tiny, slick head crowning between her thighs. Joshua's stomach turned. He'd helped calves come into the world before. Foals, too. This didn't look like that. This looked like punishment. "Ruth," he said again, louder this time. "You hear me? I can't stop it," she whispered. And there was something in her voice that didn't belong there, something that made the hair on his arms stiffen. It wasn't fear. It wasn't pain. It was resignation, like the world had already decided what would happen, and she was just a spectator in her own body. Another knock. Harder now. A man's voice outside, sharp as a blade. "Open up. Sheriff's orders." Joshua swore under his breath. He grabbed the musket leaning by the door, then stopped. A musket wasn't going to fix this. Not if the sheriff had come with dogs. Not if the men he'd brought weren't really there for the law. Because that's what no one said out loud, not in daylight. Not even in whispers, that some men didn't hunt slaves for money. They hunted because it fed something inside them. Something old and starved. Joshua had seen that hunger before. Once, years ago. He still woke up with its teeth in his dreams. The voice came again, closer now. "Last chance. You open or we do." Joshua's pulse slammed against his ribs. He looked at the trapdoor, then at the window, then back again. If they found her, if they found the child. But that's when he realized his mistake. His eyes dragged back to Ruth, and the word child wouldn't fit in his mind anymore. The thing between her legs wasn't small the way newborns are small. It wasn't soft. Its shoulders forced her hips apart at an angle that looked impossible. And its head, God help him, its head was too perfect, not misshapen like most births. Smooth, whole, and its eyes were open. No, that couldn't be right. Babies didn't do that. Babies didn't stare straight into you, like they were taking inventory of your soul. Ruth gasped. A wet, tearing sound, and then it was out. The first one. It slid into her arms like a thing that had been waiting its whole life to move. No crying, no noise, just breathing. Slow and steady, like it had practiced in the dark. "Ruth," Joshua whispered, because he couldn't make his voice do anything else. "Lord have mercy." But the Lord wasn't anywhere near this room. Joshua knew it the way a man knows winter's coming, by the taste in the wind. The child blinked up at him, and for a second, God forgive him, Joshua thought it smiled. Then Ruth's body convulsed again. Harder. Her nails dug into the dirt floor as something else forced its way down. Joshua staggered back, bile burning the back of his throat. Twins. She was having twins. That was bad enough. That was another wet snap, another rush of blood. And then there were two infants lying side by side on the blanket, their faces, mirrors of each other, their tiny fists clenched like they'd been born ready to fight. Joshua's head spun. He wanted to run, to tear up through the trapdoor and out into the snow and keep going until the cold burned his lungs clean. But his legs wouldn't move, because Ruth wasn't done. The third one came faster, too fast. It slid out like it had been waiting for the others to make room. And when it joined them, the 3 of them turned their heads at the same time, not toward Ruth, not toward the blood or the shadows, or the whispering corners, toward him. 3 pairs of eyes, same shape, same shade, black as river stones at midnight, and behind that blackness, something alive, something aware. The door above exploded inward with a crack like gunfire. boots on the boards, voices shouting. Joshua jerked his head up, heart hammering. He dropped. The trapdoor shut without thinking and threw the rug back over it, smearing it with blood that would damn him if they saw. The men came in like wolves' thick coats, hard faces, pistols already drawn. Snow melted in their beards and dripped onto the floor like spit. The sheriff wasn't with them. Joshua had hoped he would be, but hopes were for fools, evenin', the first man said, his grin full of teeth and something worse, cold. Night to be up burnin' wood, ain't it? Joshua said nothing. His throat felt like iron. The man's eyes slid to the floor, lingered on the dark stain blooming beneath the rug. One eyebrow crawled up slow. You spill something, preacher? Joshua forced a smile that didn't fit his face. Pig's blood, he lied. Slaughtered earlier. The man looked at him for a long time. Too long. Then he laughed, low and ugly. Pig, huh? Ain't no pig I ever saw that bled like that. Another man stepped toward the rug. Joshua's fingers twitched toward the musket. Then a sound stopped everyone cold. A cry, thin, high, but not the cry of a newborn. It was too even, too measured, like music played on a single note, held without breath. The man froze with his boot on the rug. Slowly, his head turned toward Joshua. What was that? Joshua's mouth opened. No words came. The cry came again. This time, it wasn't one voice. It was three, perfectly in sync. The man yanked the rug back before Joshua could move. He grabbed the iron ring and wrenched the trapdoor up, and that was the last thing he ever did with both hands, because the first one moved so fast Joshua didn't see it, just the spray of blood. The scream that wasn't a scream, but a gurgle as the man's throat opened under something too small to hold that much strength. His pistol went off wild, shattering the window, and snow blew in like breath from another world. The others shouted, fired. The basement filled with smoke and the stink of powder and something else. Something like copper and meat and rain on a dead animal's fur. Joshua backed against the wall, eyes wide, watching the shadows writhe as the men went down one by one. Their screams lasted less time than the echo of the shots. When the silence came back, it was thicker than before, heavy, alive. Joshua stared at the open trapdoor, at the black gap yawning like a mouth. Slowly, something climbed out. Not a man, not a beast. Three small bodies moving like they shared one mind. Their eyes fixed on him, and for the first time in his life, Joshua believed in hell, not the kind they preached about on Sundays. The real one, the one that smiles like a child. Ruth, he whispered. Sweet Jesus. Ruth. But Ruth was gone. Her body lay in a heap at the bottom of the stairs, empty as an old sack. Her eyes were open, but they didn't see. The three of them pattered across the floor on bare, bloody feet, and when they stood in front of him, side by side, they did something that would haunt him until the day he died. They spoke, not words, not really, just one sound, a sound that made Joshua's bones want to crawl out of his skin. A sound like the earth humming under the weight of something too old to name. And then they smiled. Joshua didn't run that night. He couldn't. By the time his legs remembered how, the snow was red and the house behind him was burning. He didn't look back. Not once. But others did. And what they found in the ashes wasn't human. That's where the story should have ended. But it didn't. Because what came out of that basement didn't die. It walked into the world and kept walking. And every place it touched turned strange. You think you know history. You think you know what built this country. You don't know a damn thing. Pause for breath. Then the mentor tone deepens for the hook into the next descent. What I'm about to tell you next will explain why entire towns vanished from maps, why men with badges sold their souls for silence, and why a war that should have lasted months dragged on for years. Because those three didn't grow up like normal boys. They didn't just survive. They thrived, and every secret society, every hidden order, every accidental fire you've ever read about in the Midwest, it all started here. You still listening? Good. But remember I warned you. Next time, we go deeper, to the first year they walked among men, and to the thing they did in Gallipolis that made even the devil look away. The fire should have killed the story. Flames have a way of erasing truth. turning bone to powder and names to rumors. But stories are stubborn. They stick like burrs in the wool of memory, passed from one mouth to another until they grow teeth of their own. That night, the blaze swallowed Joshua's cabin whole, spitting sparks into the black sky like dying stars. The wind carried the smell for miles, pine smoke braided with something darker, something that made the dogs howl and the crows take wing before dawn. By morning, the sheriff's men were ash scattered across the snow, their rifles warped into iron snakes by the heat. The official word, if you can call it that, was simple: accident, cabin fire. Preacher Joshua dead with the rest. Tragic, but not uncommon in those days, when men built homes from tinder and prayed storms would pass them by. That explanation satisfied the newspapers. It even satisfied most of the county. Men too tired and too poor to ask questions that wouldn't put bread on the table. But it didn't satisfy him. The sheriff, his name was Abraham Yates, and he wasn't a man who lost his people easy. When word came back that 5 of his deputies had vanished in the pines, Yates rode out himself. He found what was left of them, what the flames hadn't claimed, found the musket balls buried in the walls where men had fired blind, found tracks in the snow too small for grown men, too wrong for animals, 3 sets, each one bare, each one deep as if the ground feared to hold their weight. Yates didn't speak a word of that to the others, not yet, but something settled behind his eyes that day, something sharp and certain as frost. He brought in men, quiet men, men who didn't wear badges, but carried books with covers blacker than crow wings. They camped in the woods where the cabin had been, and when the thaw came and the last embers cooled to bone-white dust, they were still there, digging, whispering, setting marks in the trees no one else could read. You ever heard the name Gallipolis? Most folks haven't. Just a dot on the map where the Ohio bends like a broken spine. That's where the tracks led. Took Yates 3 weeks to follow them, and by the time he got there, the place already stank of blood. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, you need to understand something about those 3. They didn't come into the world hungry for milk. They came hungry for knowledge. You think a newborn should be blind, blinking at light like a mole clawed out of earth. Not these. By the second night, they were standing. By the third, they were walking. And by the end of the first week, they'd learned enough to know what men were and what men could give. Joshua didn't die in the fire. Not then. He ran until the soles of his boots split, until the sky lightened with morning, and the smoke was only a taste at the back of his throat. He told himself he'd keep running forever if he had to. But forever ends where hunger begins, and his stomach dragged him into a town just shy of the river, where no one knew his face. He thought he was safe. He thought wrong, because they followed him. He woke in a loft above the stables, straw scratching his skin, his breath fogging in the cold. For a moment, he thought the nightmare had burned away with the cabin. Then he saw the tracks in the hay, 3 sets, small, perfect, leading straight to where he lay. And there, at the foot of his pallet, they stood, naked as birth, pale as moonlight, eyes black as wells with no bottom. Watching him, Joshua prayed, not with words, with the shaking of his bones. But if God was listening, he kept his hands over his ears. The smallest of the 3, the one born last, crouched and touched Joshua's ankle. Just a finger, light as a moth's wing, and Joshua screamed like a man being flayed alive, because where that finger touched, the flesh shriveled, cracked, and turned black as char. The rot crawled up his leg like ivy on a tombstone. He tore at it, clawing his own skin. But the more he fought, the faster it climbed. His heart stopped before the rot reached his chest. His eyes stopped last. The 3 of them stood over what was left, heads cocked, like sparrows studying a worm. Then they did something that would have chilled the marrow of any man who saw. They smiled, not the cruel grin of killers, but the soft curve of children pleased with a trick well done. By dawn, they were gone. And so was Joshua. After that, the killings spread like rot through a barrel of apples. First an old widow on the edge of town, then a pair of trappers who shared more than their traps, then a schoolmaster whose books were found scattered in the mud, their pages torn out, their words gone as if swallowed. No tracks, no suspects, just whispers that grew like vines in the dark. Gallipolis wasn't a city then, just a huddle of cabins, a church that smelled of damp wood, and a tavern where men drank to forget what winter promised. But winter's easy to forget. What came wasn't. The brothers, though calling them that, feels wrong in the mouth. They learned fast how to talk, how to mimic, how to wear faces that didn't belong to them. They walked among men before the leaves returned to the trees. 3 boys, pale and sweet as Sunday angels. Folks pitied them at first. Poor orphans, they said. Parents dead in the fire. Terrible thing. They gave them bread, blankets, beds near the hearth. And the brothers smiled. It's easy to feed when folks open their doors, easier still when they open their throats in prayer. By spring, Gallipolis was a graveyard with lanterns. That's when Yeats rode in. He wasn't alone. Brought 6 men and something worse, a book thick as a preacher's lies, bound in hide that wasn't from any cow. They didn't come to rest. They came to bind, to bury, to burn the roots before they cracked the earth wide open. But you can't bind what's older than rope. You can't burn what carries its own fire. The first night, the brothers let them think they'd won. Let them chain their wrists, drive iron through their ankles, carve sigils in their skin till the blood ran black. Yeats believed it, believed enough to sleep with his boots off and his gun out of reach. Come morning, they found his men hanging from the beams of the church, tongues swollen, eyes gone, just gone, empty sockets staring at a sky that had no mercy left in it. And the brothers, free, always free. No one knows what Yeats saw in that church after. No one but him. Because when he came out, his beard was white as salt, and his right hand shook like a leaf in a storm. He didn't speak, not then, not ever again, not of that night. But he didn't stop hunting. You want the truth? Here it is, raw as a split bone. Those 3 didn't just live. They thrived, drifted from town to town like seeds on the wind, leaving fields of graves where roots should have grown. And every place they touched, every hollow, every bend in, the river turned strange, crops rotted, livestock birthed things with too many legs, babies came out with eyes black as tar. Folks started calling it the blight, like it was sickness. But sickness doesn't whisper in the dark, doesn't laugh when the dogs go silent. And through it all, they stayed the same, 3 faces, 3 smiles, never aging, never tiring, just watching, waiting. What for? That's the question that'll freeze your blood if you let it. Because they weren't killing for hunger. Hunger's honest. Hunger ends when the belly's full. This was different. This was practice for what's coming next. Yeats thought he could stop it. Spent the rest of his days chasing ghosts and drawing circles in dirt, leaving warnings carved into trees that no one living could read. He gathered others, men with black books and hollows, where their eyes used to be. They called themselves keepers. Keepers of what? Hell if I know. Maybe of the lie that men are still the top of the chain. Maybe of the hope that words older than God can still hold the dark at bay. But hope's a rope that frays fast. You think I'm spinning yarns. I wish I were. Because the next part, the Gallipolis massacre, that ain't a story. That's a wound, carved in the bones of this land. A whole town gone in a single night, wiped from maps like it never breathed. And if you dig deep enough, if you look at the right records, you'll find the date circled in red by men who feared what would follow. Because after Gallipolis, the brothers stopped hiding, and the first thing they did when they stepped into the open, they spoke. Words men weren't meant to hear. Words that bent the air like heat on stone. Words that made rivers change their course and birds drop dead in the sky. I could tell you those words, but if I do, you won't sleep tonight. Maybe not ever again. The voice in the story drops low, the kind that makes you lean in though you know you shouldn't. Next, I'll tell you how they turned a whole county into a grave. How Yeats tried one last time to put the fire back in the earth and what it cost him. But before that, you need to know what really happened in the church basement. The night the hymn died. The hymn had barely begun when the first voice faltered. It was a small sound at first, like a splitter in the wood of a door, nothing you'd notice unless your ear was tuned to cracks. But then the second voice broke, and then the third, and by the time the verse limped to its end, the only thing left singing in that church was the wind curling through the gaps in the boards. Yeats knew before anyone else. He felt it in the marrow of his teeth. That old animal knowing that tells a man when the world has shifted and will never tilt back. He had the book open on the pulpit, thick and wet looking under the lantern glow, its pages crawling with letters that didn't hold still if you stared too long. His men were scattered through the pews, faces drawn tight as boot leather, each one clutching iron charms and muttering verses in a tongue that scraped like gravel. They weren't praying for salvation. They were begging for a delay, a few more minutes before the sky split. And then came the sound, not a crash, not a scream, just a thud, soft and final, like a body dropping from a rope that had been waiting for years. Heads turned, lantern light swayed. Yates raised his hand, but it was too late. The doors swung inward without a whisper, and cold rolled through like a tide pulling graves from the bottom of a river. Three of them, barefoot, bare as sin. The lantern flames leaned toward them as if drawn by breath, their glow turning pale and sickly like marrow under skin. They didn't hurry. They walked the aisle slow, soft, hands hanging loose at their sides, black eyes eating every flicker of light and giving nothing back. The smallest smiled first. That smile had teeth white as bleached bone and lips red as something raw and beating. It tilted its head, and Yates saw the sigil still carved in its chest from the binding. They'd cut it deep enough to make a man bleed out twice, but the flesh had whereupon smooth, the mark only a pale scar shining like frost in the lamplight. He didn't shout, didn't raise his gun. He just said one word, low and hoarse, circle. The men moved as they drilled, boots thudding, iron chains rasping. They closed ranks around the brothers, charms clinking, mouths spitting syllables like sparks. The words rose and tangled in the rafters, and for a breath, the air thickened, the lantern flame steadied. The cold paused like a beast scenting a trap. Then the eldest taller by a head, its hair hanging black and straight as spilled ink, lifted its eyes. One blink, that was all, and the chains in the men's hands curled like snakes struck through the spine. Charms shattered. Words died on split lips as if the air had been sucked clean from their throats. The hymn didn't die. It never had the chance to start. They found the first man hanging from the beam before anyone heard him scream. His feet dangled, boots tapping, a slow rhythm against the wall like a dying clock. His eyes weren't gone yet. They just watched, wide and wet, as the rope bit deeper and his tongue crept out pink and swollen. The second man folded in half without a hand touching him, bones bending wrong like a bird's wing snapped backward. The sound it made was small, a knuckle popping, a door settling in the frame. He didn't even cry out, just stared at the floor while blood pattered from his nose in time with the boots above. The third was faster. A shadow slid over his face, blacker than coal smoke, blacker than midnight in a mine, and when it passed, his head was gone. Not torn, not cut, just gone like it had never been part of him. His body stood for a heartbeat longer, spurting dark ropes of blood that writhed as if alive, then toppled. The others broke. You'd think men who'd sworn oaths, men who'd carved their own skin with signs of warding, would hold. But they were men, and men run when the dark starts whispering their names. Yates didn't run. Not yet. He dragged the book from the pulpit, the black book, the one bound in something no cow had ever worn. Its pages writhed under his hands, letters clawing and curling like worms in soil. He spoke the words that tasted of rust and ash, words no man should know, and for a breath, the air split with light, a searing blue-white crack that clawed at the walls and painted the brothers in fire. They didn't burn. They only blinked, and then they spoke. Not in any tongue Yates had ever heard. Not in a tongue that belonged to the earth at all. The sound came like thunder through water, like bones grinding in the deep. The rafters buckled, nails screamed from wood. Lanterns burst, spilling fire across the pews, and in that jagged light, Yates saw the truth. They weren't children. Not then, not ever. Skin peeled from their faces like wet parchment, and what lay beneath wasn't flesh. It wasn't anything that fit the shape of man. It was shadow and sinew and teeth that weren't teeth but knives that grew like roots from the dark. Their eyes weren't black pits, now they were holes. Holes in the world, and behind them something vast pressed close. Too big to crawl through but straining like a hand against a door. The fire caught fast. Old timber, old varnish shit went up like dry grass. Heat slammed the room, sucking the breath from lungs, curling hymnals into black petals. Smoke coiled thick and choking, but it didn't touch them. The brothers stood easy in the flames, heads tilted, watching Yates the way a cat watches a fly beat itself against glass. He didn't stop. Couldn't. His voice tore itself raw on words that weren't words, his blood spilling on the pages as the book drank deep. His hands shook so bad he could barely trace the signs in the ash, but he kept on. Because the circle wasn't for them, it was for him. The last thing he saw before the fire took his sight was the smallest one, crouching, curious, like a child peering at an anthill. Its mouth moved, slow and soft, shaping a sound Yates almost knew. Almost. Why? Then the beams came down, and the hymn died for good. By dawn, Gallipolis was gone. Not burned. Not drowned. Just gone. The river bent around a hollow choked with ash, and where the church had stood there was only a pit blacker than pitch, edges slick like oil, as if something vast had leaned close and pressed its mouth to the earth. No bodies, no bones, no blood, but the echoes stayed. Folks talk about ghosts, lights in the trees, voices in the fog, dogs that go missing and come back with eyes like bottomless wells. Most steer clear, some don't, and the ones that don't, well, they don't talk much after. The brothers, they walked out of the smoke like shadows sliding off a wall, walked north, some say. Others swear they went west, chasing the sun till it bled into the mountains. Truth is, they went everywhere, left signs like fingerprints, blighted fields, wells that whispered, whole families gone between dusk and dawn, and always 3 sets of prints, deep in the mud, like the ground didn't want to let them go. They didn't hide anymore, didn't need to, because after Gallipolis, something woke, something older than God and hungrier than the grave, and every step they took was a pulse in its veins. Here's the part no one writes down. Yates lived. They pulled him from the river. 3 days later, skin black as cinder, hair white as frost. He didn't speak, not at first. His tongue was a lump of meat chewed raw by smoke, but his eyes, they spoke plenty, wide and wet and knowing, like a man who's seen the inside of the sky and come back burned. When he healed enough to hold a pen, he wrote 1 line, just one, on the last page of a Bible that wasn't his. They're making a door. After that, he didn't write again. The killings didn't stop. They only changed, grew sharper, meaner, like a hand honing a blade. Folks started finding patterns in the deaths, triads, always triads, 3 in one night, 3 days apart, 3 months between each cycle, and at the heart of each pattern, a place where the earth buckled, where roots twisted up from the soil like fingers clutching for air. They called those places knots, knots in the world, and if you cut deep enough into a knot, the ground bleeds. Yates hunted till his bones were dust. Others took his place, men with black books and scars like maps carved in their flesh. They call themselves keepers still, though what they're keeping is anyone's guess. Some say it's the secret, some say it's the door, some say it's the dark itself, bound and bucking in chains older than names. Me? I don't think the dark ever wore chains. Want to know what's worse? They're not done. Gallipolis was just a whisper, a test. And if you're hearing this now, if the hair on your neck is prickling, if the shadows feel thick as will, you already know the truth. The door's not coming. It's already open, and they're standing in the frame, smiling, smiling. Rain came 3 days after Gallipolis burned, though there was nothing left to wet but ash and bone dust ground so fine it slid like silk. Under a boot sole, the river ran high, swollen and gray, tugging at its banks as if it wanted to wash the hollow clean, but water couldn't touch what lay under that soil. Folks who wandered too close said the ground gave, soft and springy like a grave left open too long. And if you stood still long enough, you'd feel it breathe. One boy put his ear to the earth on a dare. He didn't hear heartbeats, he heard voices, dozens of them, whispering from far down in the black, speaking in a tongue slick as oil, full of clicks and hums and laughter without breath. He clawed his own ears out with a penknife 2 days later and lived another week before he walked into the river and never came up. By then, Gallipolis was already a ghost on the map. The railroad stopped running through, the roads washed out, And the mail went missing more often than not. The government, what little it cared to look this far, chalked it to disease first, then flood, then nothing at all. Easier that way. Easier to let a town sink quiet and hope the mud takes its memory. But memory has roots, and some roots run deeper than hell. The first killings after Gallipolis happened upriver near Pomeroy. 3 farmhands on a spread owned by the Ashford family, though owned might have been generous. Dead ate that farm down to its bones years back, and old Thomas Ashford was half a corpse himself, yellow-eyed and coughing blood like rust from a pump. He swore the boys just left in the night, run off for wages or whiskey, till they found the pieces, not all of them, just the mouths, each one tucked neat under the eaves of the barn like charms, lips chewed to ribbons, teeth loose in their gums, as if someone tried to pull them and quit halfway through. And every tongue gone dot they sent word downriver, though nobody expected help. Men don't come fast to places like that. Too far, too poor, too strange. But one man came, Yates, or what was left of him. He wasn't the sort you'd notice if you didn't know to look. Just a tall shadow in a black coat gone green with age, hat low, boots leaving prints deep as though the mud wanted to swallow him whole. His hair was white now, white like milk glass, hanging to his shoulders in stringy ropes, skin burned and cracked from the fire, one eye clouded, the other sharp as a nail. He didn't talk much, not that anyone wanted him to. His mouth was a ruin, lips scarred stiff, words crawling out in a rasp that sounded more like smoke than speech. He walked that farm like a hound on a scent, stood in the barn, staring up at those mouths for near an hour, one hand clutching a string of iron nails slick with something black that wasn't pitch. Then he left without a word, heading north on foot, moving like a man who had miles left in him and nothing else at all. After that, it spread. Ohio bled into Kentucky, Kentucky into Virginia, Virginia into Tennessee, and everywhere the same pattern. 3 gone in one night, always quiet, always clean except for what they left behind. Sometimes it was mouths, sometimes it was hands, each one nailed to a tree pointing the same way, like a signpost for something that didn't need signs. Sometimes it was just absence beds still warm, plates still set, no sound but the flies buzzing where the meat should have been. People whispered about killers, cults, devils walking on 2 legs, but the old ones, the ones with faces folded in wrinkles deep as dry creek beds, they knew better. They'd sit on their porches with pipes cold and eyes on the tree line, waiting for night like a man waits for a debt collector. They remembered stories their granddaddies told, stories about things that came before fences and fires and the word of God, things that wore faces like masks till the masks rotted off and what lay underneath crawled out, things you couldn't shoot, couldn't hang, couldn't drown. All you could do was bargain or burn, and burn they tried. There was a town called Harlow, tucked in a crook of the Cumberland where the hills rose like knuckles and the fog never lifted. Harlow had a preacher mean as a copperhead and twice as fast, a man who believed iron and scripture could fix anything if you nailed them hard enough. When the first child vanished, little girl named Daisy, with hair yellow as dandelions, he rang that bell till the rope burned his palms raw. By sundown, the whole town stood in the square, eyes wide, mouths thin, clutching pitchforks and axes like they were going to war. They found Daisy 2 days later, sitting on the church steps in her nightgown, barefoot, smiling, not a mark on her, not a scratch, just that smile stretched to wide and to white, and her voice soft as feathers when she said, "They're coming to sing with us." They burned her that night, didn't help. 3 more gone the next week, 3 more the week after. And then Harlow was nothing but a ring of black stumps smoking under the moon, the air thick with a stink that never washed out. Folks say you can still hear the bell sometimes, way down in the fog, ringing slow and sweet like a lullaby. By then, Yates wasn't alone. There were others, men and women both, drawn by blood or fear or something darker, all of them carrying signs carved in skin and books bound in hides that made your stomach turn to guess at. They called themselves keepers, though what they were keeping was a matter of debate. Some swore they were holding the line, keeping the dark from spilling out like floodwater over a broken dam. Others whispered they were keeping it fed, throwing scraps to the wolves so the pack stayed outside the door. maybe both, maybe neither. Doesn't matter now. What matters is this: every last one of them knew the truth Yeats wrote in that Bible truth. In 7 words, scratched by a hand that shook like wind in dead leaves, they're making a door. And it's wide.c. Gallipolis wasn't the feast. It was the prayer before it. Every death since, every triad. Every mouth gone, and hand nailed and bone buried in knots of earth that wasn't chaos. It was order. A pattern drawn in blood on the skin of the world. And patterns mean purpose. Yeats chased that pattern till his boots wore thin, till his hands were nothing but scars and tremors, till the white in his hair turned to frost on a grave. He followed it through hollers and hills, through coal camps and company towns, through swamps that stank of rot and rivers that ran black as ink. And everywhere he went, he left signs behind, iron circles hammered into bedrock, cairns built of bones no man would claim. Words smeared in ash that curled like snakes across the doorframes of empty houses. Folks who found them tore them down, fast and prayed faster, but prayer don't mend cracks in the world. They say Yeats died in Arkansas, though nobody saw him go. One day he was there, hunched on a tavern bench with his book and his bottle, muttering about doors and keys and the number 3. Next day, gone, left the book, though. Always leaves the book. That was 20 years after Gallipolis. 100. More have gone since. 100 years of doors swinging wider, of keepers dying in circles drawn too late, of songs cut short by teeth that aren't teeth at all. And now here we are, standing with the river at our backs and the wind full of whispers, asking the same question Yeats asked with his last breath. What comes through when the door's done opening? The pattern didn't fade with time. It sharpened, moved with the roads, the rails, the lines of wire strung across hills like veins of steel, wherever man cut the earth. The knots swelled, mines collapsed on calm days, bridges twisted like hot wax, whole shifts of men swallowed in shafts that bled water thick as syrup, their helmets bobbing back up days later with the lamps still burning, though nothing living should have kept them lit. And then came the cities. The brothers loved the cities. More noise to hide in, more shadows to stretch, more mouths to sing the hymn that never finishes. They learned new shapes, new names, wore coats and hats and smiles borrowed from faces no one remembered missing. They walked streets slick with rain and oil, hands in their pockets, whistling tunes that curled your gut without knowing why. And when the trios died, no one counted. Too many gone already. Too many stories ending in alleys nobody swept. But the keepers counted. They always do. They moved quiet, like molten walls, passing books hand to hand, carving sigils where no eyes lingered long. They buried charms in churchyards and sewed iron into the hems of coats. They killed, too, when killing was all that kept the night from spilling over. But every year, the pattern grew clearer. Every year, the door creaked wider. And every year, the brothers smiled wider to no one knows what they are now. Were they ever men? Are they still 3? Some say no, that the number is just a shape they wear, a joke between themselves and whatever waits behind them. Others swear they've seen the same faces, unchanged, in photographs yellow with a century's rot. But photographs lie, eyes don't. And if you've ever met those eyes, you know the truth. They're still here. You want the worst of it? The door's not a thing, not a frame you can bar or a hole you can fill with stone. It's everywhere. It's every knot, every binding, every ritual botched or broken. It's every story whispered by firelight, every hymn that falters, every deal made with things that smile too wide. The door is the sum of all our fears, and they've been building it with our own hands since the first man carved the first mark in the first tree. And now, God help us, it's almost done. Almost. And when it opens, well, if you're listening to this, if you're reading the words carved in my skin or the ink running black on these pages, then maybe you're a keeper too, though you don't know it yet. Maybe you've felt it, the pull, the thrum-I. Nathan read the first page out loud, his voice a raw whisper. The handwriting wasn't neat, not the careful loops of a man with time and calm. It was jagged, frantic, letters gouged into the paper as though each word cost blood to write. And maybe it had. The ink was brown, aged, but it bloomed in dark patches that looked almost like rust, or something wetter. they walk. He read, his throat tight. They walk and they wait. Every three, the river hums there. Names, the sky tilts when they smile. Don't look at their teeth. Don't. His voice faltered. The last word trailed off in a spidery scrawl that tore the page. He turned it with hands that didn't feel like his own. The paper stuck to his fingers. He didn't want to know why that Mara leaned over his shoulder. The lantern's glow painting her face in molten amber, hollowing her cheeks so she looked carved. Her breath came quick, sharp, but her voice was steady when she spoke. This is Yates. It has to be. She ran a finger down the margin, tracing the splintered script. Look at this mark. At the bottom of the page, stamped in what looked like wax, but had sunk into the paper like it was hungry, was a sigil. 3 concentric circles, broken by lines that bent like bones. Nathan didn't answer, couldn't, because the second page wasn't words, it was drawings. Children, at first glance, if you didn't look too long. 3 of them, hands clasped, heads tilted, but their mouths were wrong, too wide, full of teeth that weren't teeth but shards, black as a pit with a shine like oil. Their eyes weren't eyes either, they were hollow, scooped out, and something inside those hollows writhed. Behind them stretched a doorway that wasn't a door. It was ribs, a ribcage split wide, curved into an arch, and through it bled darkness. Like smoke. He slammed the book shut. The sound cracked the attic's hush like a shot, and the dust swirled thick in the lamplight, glittering like bone dust in water. For a long minute neither of them moved. Nathan felt the weight of the journal pressing through his palms, heavy as stone, pulsing faintly like a buried heart. He almost dropped it, almost left it to rot in that hollow, to sleep under dust until the house came down on it. But he didn't. He shoved it into his satchel and cinched the strap tight. Mara met his eyes, and what he saw there hollowed him out. It wasn't fear. Not only fear, it was recognition, deep as marrow, like she'd known all along this was waiting, crouched, in the dark between words and breaths. And maybe she had. Maybe they all had, in the quiet parts of themselves they never let speak. When they climbed down from the attic, the house didn't feel the same. The air was thicker, humming faintly as if the boards themselves were remembering. The wallpaper riffed at the corners when Nathan glanced too quick. The floor dipped in places where it had been level before, like something was breathing underneath. He kept his hand on the satchel, clutching it like a weapon, though it felt more like a fuse. Outside, the night was raw and sharp, the kind of cold that bit bone and made teeth ache. Fog curled low, over the ground, slick as river smoke, muffling the sound of their boots on the gravel path. The trees loomed close, black arms clawing the sky. Somewhere far off, a dog barked, once. Then silence, the kind that feels shaped, like something carved it hollow. Nathan started the car without a word. The engine's growl broke the stillness. Like a throat clearing in a church, he backed down the drive slow, eyes fixed on the mirrors. For a breath he thought he saw something move in the upstairs window. A pale shape sliding behind the curtains like a hand brushing silk. He didn't tell Mara. Didn't have to. She was staring too, lips pressed bloodless, knuckles white on her knees. They drove. Miles of dark unspooling, headlights cutting tunnels through the fog, trees whipping past like gaunt sentinels. Neither spoke until the house was a memory, and the road stretched empty as a vein. What was that on the wall? Mara's voice, cracked like thin ice. She didn't look at him, just out the window, where the dark pressed close and thick, in the attic, behind the trunk. I saw you look. Nathan gripped the wheel so hard his nails split skin. He didn't want to answer, but the silence wanted worse. Names, he said, the word tasting like rust, carved deep, like claws. He swallowed hard. And dates. Her voice thinned. He nodded. His throat worked, but no more words came. He didn't need them. She knew. He saw it in her eyes when she turned, that shine wet and wide, reflecting the glow of the dash. She knew what he'd seen. The last date wasn't old. It wasn't decades past. It was next week. Neither spoke. Again, they hit town near midnight, a spill of lights in the fog like fireflies drowned in milk. Motel neon buzzed faint and sickly, flickering red letters that bled into the mist, VAC_NCY. Nathan swung into the lot, tires crunching gravel, and killed the engine. The silence after was worse than the road. He sat there, staring at the cracked windshield, at the halo of the sign pulsing soft like a weak heart. Mara was already out, slamming the door like she could shut the night out with it. She stood under the sign, breath clouding pale, arms wrapped tight. Nathan followed, the satchel swinging heavy at his side, its weight dragging at his spine. The office stank of old coffee and mildew. The clerk's smile stretched thin as brittle rubber. He didn't ask questions, just slid a key across the counter and muttered something about cash only. Nathan paid without blinking. Paper money felt safer than names. The room was a box that smelled of bleach and ghosts. One bed, one lamp that flickered like a dying eye, a TV crouched in the corner, screen black and slick with dust. The carpet squelched faint when Nathan stepped. He didn't care. He locked the door, chained it, shoved the dresser against it for good measure. Mara sat on the bed, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the satchel like it might start bleeding. He dropped it on the table, slow, and unbuckled the strap. The journal lay there like a thing that knew it was being watched. He didn't want to open it again. God, he didn't. But not knowing was worse. Not knowing meant guessing. And guessing left space for hope. Hope was a trap. He flipped it open. The next pages were worse. Whole spreads of diagrams that didn't fit geometry, angles that bent wrong, curves that looped into themselves like snakes swallowing tails, words that crawled sideways, letters fused into symbols that made his teeth ache if he stared too long. And always the number 3. 3 circles, 3 marks, 3 figures drawn over and over, standing in fields, in doorways, in rivers. That boiled black dot. One page showed a map, rough, ink-smeared and torn. But Nathan knew those lines. The river's spine, bending through hills. Tiny crosses marked its banks, each scrawled with dates. Some were decades old. Some were last year. And one was circled so hard it tore the page. Beside it, in a hand that shook so bad the letters bled together, one word hollow. Mara leaned close, her breath sharp in his ear. That's here. She whispered, that's this county. He nodded, couldn't stop staring at the circle. The way the ink had bitten deep, tearing the fibers like claws. The date beneath it made his gut twist. For days from now. What happens in 4 days? Mara asked, though her voice said she didn't want the answer. Nathan turned the page. The last entry wasn't words. It was a smear, wide and dark, like something dragged its fingers through blood and ash. Underneath, barely visible, carved so deep it cut the paper, was a single line. They're almost through. The lamp flickered. They froze, breath locked. The light stuttered once, twice, then burned steady. Nathan swallowed hard, throat clicking like a trigger. The shadows didn't look right now. They pulled too deep, stretched too far, like something was pressing against them from the other side. Mara stood slow, knees trembling. We need to leave, she said, voice thin as wire. We need to burn it. Burn the book. Burn the house. Burn. A knock cut her off, soft, 3 taps, slow as dripping water. They stared at the door. The chain quivered. The dresser shivered, like something leaned hard from the other side. 3 taps again. Louder now. Nathan's blood went ice. He grabbed the journal, clutching it tight, and backed toward the bathroom. Mara followed, steps silent, breath ragged. The knocking stopped. Silence bloomed heavy and wet. Then the voice came, small, sweet, a child's voice. Can we come in? Mara's hand clamped Nathan's wrist, nails biting deep. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The voice came again, lilting soft like a lullaby. It's cold out here. The lamp died. Dark swallowed the room whole, thick and choking. And in that black, something smiled. Things smiled. The darkness didn't fall. It pressed, heavy as wet earth. Thick enough Nathan thought if he reached out his hands would come back slick. His breath hitched sharp in his throat, and he could hear Mara's rasping, quick and shallow, like she was drowning. The smell hit him next, copper and soil, rich and sweet like a grave split open. The lamp's heat died fast, leaving the air cold and damp, a cellar deep underground. Something moved. Not a sound, not at first, just a shift, a soft collapsing of space, as if the dark itself folded inward. Nathan strained his ears, every nerve, screaming, and then he heard it, the slow drag of something soft across the carpet. Like a bare foot, or fingers, or both at once, Mara's hand found his in the black. Her skin was ice, slick with sweat. She gripped so hard it hurt, nails digging crescents deep. But he didn't pull away. He couldn't. His other hand clutched the journal tight against his chest, pages biting his palm like teeth. He tried to swallow, but his throat locked. Then, the voice came again, closer now. Inside the room. Please, we're so cold. It was still a child's voice, light and lilted, but wrong in a way Nathan couldn't name. Too smooth, too even, like words poured from a hollow. No breath behind them, no break. Just a sound shaped like kindness. Mara whimpered, small and sharp. Nathan squeezed her hand and pulled her backward, inch by inch, toward the bathroom door. His shoes caught on the carpet, sticking faint, like something clung to the fibers. He didn't dare look, didn't dare turn his head. He kept his eyes on the strip of pale under the bathroom door, the only light left. Moonlight smeared thin through a slit in the curtains. If they could reach it, if they could lock the door, the strip went dark. Something moved between them. And the window, something that blocked the light, slow and heavy, like a shadow dragging meat. Nathan froze, his breath hitched so loud it felt like a scream. The room smelled thicker now, rot and rust, like wet pennies and old bones pulled from river muck. And under that, something sweeter, like fruit left too long in the sun. The voice came again, right in front of him now. Please. Nathan almost broke. His knees sagged, and for a heartbeat he wanted to let go, wanted to open his arms. Let whatever was speaking curl close and warm and quiet. But then Mara's nails bit harder, and he snapped back, teeth gritted. He yanked her forward, hard, stumbling toward the bathroom. The air shifted as they moved, thick currents brushing their skin like fur. Something giggled low and soft behind them, high-pitched and broken, a sound like glass teeth rattling in a jar. They slammed through the bathroom door and locked it fast, Nathan's fingers fumbling the bolt until it scraped home. He sagged against the wood, chest heaving, sweat slicking his back like oil. Mara pressed herself into the far wall, knees drawn up, shaking so hard her teeth chattered like stones. The light in here was dim, sickly blue from a single flickering bulb. It buzzed faint, fighting the dark that bled under the door in thick tendrils. Like smoke that knew hunger. Nathan gripped the sink with one hand, the journal with the other, and tried to breathe slow, tried to think. The knocking came again, soft against the wood, almost polite. 3 taps, then silence. Mara whispered his name, just his name, small and cracking. He looked at her, and what he saw in her face turned his guts to water. Not fear, not only fear, something else, something hollow, gnawing deep, like the dark had reached inside and scraped her clean. They're not outside, she said. Her voice was wrong, too flat. They're never outside. Nathan shook his head, sharp and fast, like he could shake the words out of the air. Don't, he rasped, don't say that. Her eyes slid to the mirror. Nathan followed before he could stop himself. The glass was wrong. It didn't show the room, not like it should. The tile, the walls, they bent, warped, stretched deep like water, and in that water, shapes moved, thin and long, bending backward at angles that cracked like branches. Their faces, or what should have been faces, were smooth and pale as boiled bone, and when they turned, the hollows where eyes should live rippled wet, black and bottomless. Nathan grabbed the journal and slammed it against the mirror. The glass didn't break. It didn't even shudder. It rippled, soft, swallowing the blow like a pond takes a stone. The shapes inside tilted their heads in unison, slow as clocks unwinding, and then they smiled, not mouths, not teeth, just cracks splitting that smooth bone white, peeling wide until the darkened side spilled through like ink. Mara screamed. Nathan grabbed her, yanked her back from the mirror as the cracks spread, splitting wider, glass bulging out like something behind it pressed hard. He didn't think. He kicked the bathroom door, once, twice, until the bolt tore free and the wood splintered. The dark on the other side poured in like water, thick and alive, curling up his legs, cold as gravestone. He hauled Mara through, stumbling into the room, choking on the smell of rot and something sweet enough to gag. The room wasn't empty now. Shapes stood in the corners, 3 of them tall, their heads nearly brushing the ceiling, their limbs wrong too many joints, bending where no joints should be. Their skin hung loose in places, taut in others like sacks half filled, and their faces God. Their faces were all cracks now, peeling wider as they smiled. Teeth like glass shards jutted through, slick with black that dripped slow to the carpet. Hissing where it fell, Nathan didn't think. He didn't speak. He ran. He dragged Mara with him, feet sliding in the muck that wasn't muck, that clung like hands. The shapes didn't move fast. They didn't need to. Their heads turned as he passed, twisting all the way around with soft wet cracks. Voices spilled from those mouths, layered now children, women, men, all whispering the same thing. Stay, stay, stay. Nathan hit the door shoulder first, felt the dresser scrape and topple, wood splitting as he tore it wide. The night outside hit him cold and raw, fog boiling thick and low like smoke. He didn't stop, didn't look back. He ran, lungs ripping, Mara's hand slick in his, boots pounding gravel like drums. The mist clung, swallowing sound, swallowing light, until the motel was gone like it never was. Only the dark, only the fog, only the whispering behind them. Soft and sweet as lullabies. They didn't stop running, not when the road fell behind, not when the trees closed in, black arms clawing the sky. Nathan's legs burned, his breath sawed like knives, but he ran until his chest felt hollow, until the cold bit so deep he couldn't feel his hands. And still, behind them, the whispers trailed, slow and patient, never rushing, until they stopped, just like that. Gone. Nathan staggered to a halt, bent double, chest heaving fire. The fog thinned here, just enough to see the ground a spill of pale stones, a ditch yawning black, trees hunched close, their bark slick like wet bone. Mara collapsed beside him, curling tight, sobbing soundless. He dropped the journal. It fell open, pages flapping like wings in the cold wind. He stared down and froze. The map. It was the map again. Only now the ink wasn't ink. It was wet, dark. The circle was bigger, tearing the page, and words crawled out from it, words that hadn't been there before, scrawling slow as veins growing. Almost here. Nathan snatched it up, heart slamming his ribs. His breath smoked in the air, thick as fog, and then he saw why the whispers had stopped. The stones weren't stones. They were skulls, pale and smooth, half sunk in the dirt like teeth. And the ditch wasn't a ditch. It was a door. Not wood, not metal. Bone, ribs arched wide, white and slick, curved into a frame that pulsed faint, like something behind it breathed. The space inside wasn't black, not empty. It rippled, soft and wet, like the surface of deep water, and things moved in it, shapes bending wrong, long limbs unfurling slow. Mara clutched his arm, nails biting deep. What is that? She whispered, voice raw. Nathan's throat locked. His mind screamed one word, over and over, pounding like blood in his ears. Hollow. The air shuddered. Not wind, not sound, just a pressure, low and deep, like the earth humming. In its sleep, the ribs widened, peeling slow, and the water light inside swelled bright, bleeding pale across the fog. And in that light, 3 figures stepped. Thin, tall, smiling wide. Mara screamed again, and Nathan felt it, that pull, deep and sweet, dragging at his bones, at his breath. A voice, soft as silk, curling inside his skull. Stay, just stay. He dropped the journal. It hit the ground, pages spilling wide, and the words on them writhed, curling off the paper like smoke. Symbols crawled across the dirt, glowing pale, coiling up his boots like vines. His skin burned where they touched. He grabbed Mara, hauling her back, but the earth split behind them, cracks yawning wide, light spilling up like milk turned black. The trees bent low, roots tearing free, and the fog rose screaming. And then they spoke, not whispers now, not soft, voices layered, thunder, wrapped in honey, shaking the marrow of the world. 3, always 3. The light swallowed the sky, The light was not light. It had no warmth, no color, no mercy. It poured out in slow tides, thick as syrup, glistening like oil under moonless skies. It coated the ribs, dripped down the pulsing frame, and rolled across the earth in trembling waves. Everywhere it touched, the world folded inward, trees bent, leaves curled to ash. Stones sagged like wax in a furnace. Nathan stared into it until his eyes screamed and still couldn't understand what he saw. Not shapes, not really, just movement. A slow unfurling, like fingers reaching through water, long and thin, bending the wrong way. Mara clutched him, nails carving lines into his wrist, her breath a ragged saw. He tried to pull her back, but the ground moved underfoot, slick with symbols that crawled and bled. His boots sank into the glow like wet clay. Every muscle screamed to run, but the air was heavy as tar, pressing down, choking him with a sweetness that rotted on the tongue. The voices surged again. No longer whispers, no longer layered lullabies, but a roar that came from everywhere and nowhere, pounding in his ribs like a second heartbeat. 3, 3, always 3. The ribs split wider, cracking slow like old ice. Something pressed against the membrane beyond, a bulge that shimmered, straining outward until the surface tore in a gush of black light. It spilled like blood, thick and crawling, hissing where it struck the soil. From that tear, the first head came through. If it was a head, smooth and pale, boneless where a skull should be, its face a blank stretch of flesh until, slowly, it split. Cracks peeling wide, running like fractures across porcelain, until they formed a grin to wide, to deep, spilling dark threads that writhed like veins. It turned toward them, and from the hollow sockets where eyes should live, light poured a light so pale it flayed everything it touched. Mara screamed. Nathan couldn't move. He couldn't even breathe. The sound hit him first, before the smell. A chorus rising from that grin, voices stacked like bodies in a pit, chanting one word over and over, rolling like thunder wrapped in silk. Stay. Something inside him trembled loose, something deep and buried, and for one fragile second he wanted to obey, to let go, to sink into that voice, to stop running and fold into the sweetness waiting in the dark. The thought slid soft through his skull like honey over bone. Why fight? It will end the hunger. The noise, the hollow in your ribs. Just stay. Just be still. Mara tore at him, nails ripping skin. Nathan, her voice cracked raw, breaking the spell, and he staggered, breath tearing loose in a sob. The light scorched his vision white, but he forced his eyes down, away from the grinning thing spilling through the door. The ground split again, this time behind them. Earth belched black mist, thick and wet, and something rose, a figure. At first, Nathan thought it was another of them, another hollow thing. Bone and dark and too many joints, but then it spoke, and the voice was human. Hoarse, ragged. Nate. The name froze his blood. He knew that voice as slowly. Against every screaming nerve, he turned. The fog peeled back like curtains, and from it stepped a man, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a coat slick with something dark. His face, oh God, his face was pale under the moonlight, beard matted, eyes wide and black as wells. But it was him. Caleb. Nathan's single quotes S brother, except Caleb had been dead for 6 years. Nathan's knees almost buckled. He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Mara choked on a sob, pressing into him like she could hide inside his skin. Caleb stepped closer, boots sinking into the glowing soil, leaving no prints. His smile was wrong, to calm, too soft for the hunger burning in those black eyes. You came back, Caleb said, voice low, almost tender. You came like I knew you would. Nathan shook his head, words spilling in broken gasps. You're dead. I saw Caleb. I buried you. You buried a body, Caleb said, tilting his head slow. Not me. You left me there, Nate. Left me in the dark. And now, he spread his arms wide, grinning that too wide grin. Now I'm what the dark made of me. Behind him, the door throbbed like a wound, spilling more light, more shapes pressing through. Long arms dragged against the frame, pulling torsos slick with black sheen, heads tilting, jaws splitting open like fruit overripe. The air pulsed with their chant, growing louder, shaking the earth under Nathan's feet. 3, always 3. Nathan stumbled back, dragging Mara, but the ground cracked wide around them, curling like petals, funneling them toward the door. The symbols writhed brighter, searing his boots, biting through the leather like acid. He dropped the journal without knowing, pages catching the wind, scattering like startled birds. Caleb stepped closer, calm as a man coming home. "It's okay," he whispered. "It was always gonna be you and me and her." His eyes slid to Mara, and something in that look turned Nathan's blood to ice. "She's the third. She always was," Mara sobbed, shaking her head so hard her hair whipped wild. "No, no, no, no. Yes," Caleb said, voice like a knife sliding soft. "You think you found her? No, Nate, we brought her. We called her. We wrote her name in the dark, and she came." Nathan's chest heaved, every breath a blade. He didn't want to believe it, but deep down, under bone and blood, something cracked, because hadn't it always felt that way? Like Mara was part of this before they met, like the pull that drew them together wasn't love, but gravity cold and cruel and carved in bone. The chant surged again, deafening now, a storm of voices splitting the air. The ribs of the door peeled wider, and through that widening gap came a flood of arms, thin, slick, jointed too many times, curling like roots, like veins, like fingers groping blind. They reached for him, for Mara, for Caleb, and where they touched the air, it bled black rain. Caleb smiled, soft and sweet. "Come home, Nate." Nathan grabbed Mara's face, forcing her eyes to his. Her pupils were blown wide, her lips trembling like leaves. "Run," he rasped, though his own legs felt carved from stone. "There's nowhere," she choked. "There's nowhere left." And she was right. The woods were gone now, swallowed by fog and light. The sky was a hole, yawning black, stars bleeding like open eyes. The earth had cracked wide, spilling rivers of pale fire that hissed where they touched flesh. There was only the door, and what waited behind it. Caleb stepped closer, close enough Nathan could smell him sweet rot and river mud, thick in his beard, clinging to his coat, his grin peeled wider, bones cracking under the skin. "You don't run from family," he whispered. Then he moved faster than anything human. Nathan shoved Mara sideways just as Caleb lunged, arms snapping out like broken wings. They hit the ground hard, mud spattering, breath tearing loose in screams swallowed by the roar. Nathan rolled, grabbing a stone, swinging blind, and felt it connect with Caleb's face. Bone crunched, black spilled, thick and hot, splashing his hand. Caleb laughed, didn't flinch, didn't stop. The grin split wider, tearing his cheeks open to the ears, jaws yawning like a pit. Inside, it wasn't teeth, it wasn't tongue. It was a void deep and wet. Sucking the air in ragged gusts, Mara screamed again. The arms from the door lashed out, wrapping her waist, her legs, lifting her like a doll. She clawed at them, nails ripping black flesh that healed before it tore. Nathan lunged, grabbed her hands, pulling until his shoulders burned, until something in his arms snapped hot. The arms yanked harder, dragging her back, closer to that pulsing wound of light. "Nathan," she shrieked, eyes wild, mouth spilling terror. He didn't think. He threw himself at the arms, biting, tearing, fists smashing slick bone until they cracked like glass. Black rain sprayed his face, burned his skin raw, but he didn't stop, didn't feel. There was only her hands in his, slipping. Then Caleb's arms wrapped him. From behind, steel bands, crushing ribs until they screamed, lifting him off the ground like he weighed nothing. Caleb's breath spilled hot in his ear, thick with rot and sweetness. "It's over, little brother," he murmured. "The dark takes what it's owed." Nathan thrashed, kicked, head-butted until his skull rang, but Caleb didn't budge. His grip was iron. His grin was carved in stone. The door yawned wider. The light swallowed the trees. The chant rose to a fever pitch, voices screaming one word that split the sky, THRE. The arms hauled Mara through the ribs, her scream slicing high and sharp then cutting off like a throat gone slack. Nathan howled, a sound that ripped his lungs raw, and something inside him broke. The rage, the fear, the love, all of it spilled out in one savage surge. He slammed his head back, felt bone crunch, heard Caleb grunt, and twisted free, dropping to the mud. His ribs burned. His breath came in knives. He didn't care. He ran, straight into the light. The light was not a door. It was a mouth. It swallowed him whole. And for an instant that stretched like wire, Nathan thought he had died. No sound, no weight, no breath, just a pressure against every inch of his skin, as though the world were. Fingers kneading him apart, stretching him long, thinning him into threads of thought and nerve. He opened his mouth to scream, but the scream went nowhere. His voice bled out into the white, shredded and scattered like ash on wind. Then dash impact. He hit something soft and wet, the sound like meat striking stone. Air slammed back into his lungs in a choking gasp, bitter and cold, tasting of iron and rot. He rolled onto hands and knees, gagging, spitting black slime that clung in ropes. When his vision cleared, the world was wrong. Sky if you could call it. That was a sheet of flesh, pale and veined, pulsing slow with the throb of a distant heart. It stretched endless in all directions, stitched with seams that twitched like wounds trying to close. The ground was bone, miles and miles of it, curving and cracking, slick with marrow that steamed in the cold. Shapes moved in the distant stall, thin, bent like broken fingers, gliding with a grace that made his stomach twist. They had no faces, no eyes, just mouths, too many mouths, opening and closing in silent hymns. The air hummed, not wind, not life, a vibration in his teeth, in his bones, like some enormous string plucked far away. Everything sent ripples through the sky, seams gaping wider for an instant before knitting again. Nathan staggered upright, legs trembling, ribs screaming with every breath. His clothes clung wet and heavy, soaked with black that steamed against the cold. His skin burned where it touched, puckered with blisters that pulsed like tiny hearts. He wiped at his face, and his hands came away slick with threads that writhed before curling dead. Mara, his voice was a whisper swallowed by the hum. He spun, scanning the endless bone, heart pounding like a trapped bird. She was there. Far ahead, dragged across the marrow by arms that weren't arms, ropes of sinew, pale and knotted, sprouting from the bone like roots. She didn't fight, couldn't. Her body was limp, head lolling, hair streaked black with whatever bled from this place. They hauled her toward something rising on the horizon, a tree. At least that's what his mind called it, to keep from breaking. It towered higher than mountains, its trunk a twist of vertebrae fused with tendon, its branches vast ribs splayed, like the fingers of a god. From those branches hung shapes, hundreds, maybe thousands, swaying in a wind that didn't blow. Bodies, skinless, eyeless, stitched in patterns that made his stomach lurch. And in the center of that obscene crown yawned a hole, wide and black, lined with teeth like gravestones, the heart of the hollow. Nathan stumbled forward, every step a war. The bone cracked under his boots, slick with grease that sucked at his soles. Shapes stirred at the edges of his sight, gliding closer, their mouths opening wider with every pulse of the sky. No sound came from them, but their hunger pressed, like fingers in his skull. Stay. The word slithered through the hum, soft and sweet. He spun, fists raised, but nothing stood behind him. The voice came from everywhere, soaking into his bones. Stay, Nathan. No more running, no more. Hollow, we can fill you. He ran. He didn't think, didn't breathe, just ran, slipping and skidding over slit bone. Lungs tearing, throat raw. The hum rose with his heartbeat, pounding like war drums under his ribs. Behind him, the gliding things picked up speed, their movements stuttering like broken film, jerking closer in fits and starts. Every time he blinked, they were nearer, mouths yawning wider, tongues like ropes tasting the air. Mara, he bellowed, voice cracking blood. She didn't stir. The roots hauled her higher, toward the base of that towering tree of bone and tendon, where something waited. Caleb. He stood at the roots like a priest before an altar, head tilted back, arms spread wide to the throbbing sky. His coat hung in tatters, black with slime. His face split by that impossible grin. When he saw Nathan, his eyes lit with a fire to deep. Too old, you made it, Caleb called, voice ringing clear through the hum. Knew you would, knew you'd come home. Let her go, Nathan roared, legs burning as he closed the distance. Caleb laughed, a sound like cracking bone. You still don't get it, do you? She's the key, Nate. Always was. 3 points. 3 names. 3 bones to bind the circle. Me, you, her. The tree won't open without her blood. Nathan's stomach heaved. What the hell are you talking about? Caleb's grin widened, flesh splitting until his cheeks tore, black threads spilling. The hollow needs anchors. Flesh to tether the door. You cracked it. I broke it. And now she seals it. Then it all comes through. The hum deepened, shaking the marrow under Nathan's feet. Cracks spidered through the bone, spilling steam that reeked of copper and rot. Above, the sky split for an instant, revealing not stars but eyes dozens, blinking wet and slow, their gazes spearing him like pins through a moth. Nathan gagged, bile burning his throat. His knees nearly buckled, but he forced himself on, teeth clenched so hard his jaw screamed. Caleb watched him come, head cocked like a curious dog. You could have stayed, he said, almost gentle. Could have stopped fighting. They would have made you whole. I don't want whole, Nathan spat, voice shaking. I want her back. Caleb's grin turned sad, almost pitying. You still think you can save her? He stepped aside, gesturing to the roots. They had lifted Mara high now, spreading, her arms like wings, binding her wrists and ankles in coils of tendon that pulsed with her heartbeat. Her chest rose shallow, lips blue, eyes half-lidded. Black veins crawled her throat like ink spilled under skin. Nathan's breath hitched. Mara, she stirred at his voice, head rolling weakly. Her eyes found him, and in their depths, something moved, something that wasn't her. Too late, Caleb whispered. Nathan lunged. Caleb met him halfway. They collided with the crack of bone, fists flying, grunts ripping the air. Nathan drove a knee into Caleb's gut, swung wild at his jaw, but Caleb didn't break, didn't bleed. His flesh bent like clay, absorbing the blows with sickening give. Then his hand closed on Nathan's throat, lifting him like a child. Still fighting, Caleb crooned, black drool slicking his grin. Still thinking this ends with you on top. You never learned when to let go. Nathan clawed his arm, choking, vision blotting black. The hum was a roar now, the sky splitting wider, eyes spilling light that flayed his skin raw. The tree groaned, like a beast waking, branches stretching, mouths opening in the hanging bodies. And then Mara screamed, not words, just sound, raw and ripping, tearing from her like her lungs were fire. The black veins in her skin bulged, crawling to her face, her eyes rolling white as her body convulsed. The roots rift, tightening, squeezing until bone cracked. Her scream climbed higher, higher, then cut off in a wet choke as her chest split. Nathan's world froze from the wound spilled light, not the black sheen from before, not the cold glow of the door. This was pure, white as bone under sun, searing his eyes blind. It poured from her like a river, splashing the roots, the tree, the marrow. The whole hollow shook, a quake that split the ground in yawning cracks, spilling dark fountains that hissed and steamed. Caleb dropped him, staggering back, eyes wide not with fear, but awe. She opened it. He breathed. Oh God, she opened it. The tree roared, a sound that wasn't sound, a pressure that crushed Nathan to his knees, hands clamped to bleeding ears. The hanging bodies writhed, mouths screaming, threads snapping, as they fell in heaps of wet meat. The hole at the tree's crown gaped wider, teeth peeling back, and from its depths something rose, something older than hunger, older than time. The hum became a voice, deep and cold, spilling through bone and blood. 3 to bind, 1 to break, 1 to feed. The ground split under Nathan, a fissure yawning black, and from it lashed more roots, wrapping his arms, his legs, hauling him up. He thrashed, roared, but they held like iron. Across the roots, Caleb hung limp, face slack in ecstasy, as the black threads crawled his skin, burrowing deep. He didn't fight, didn't need to. He'd chosen this. Mara dangled above them, her chest a gaping wound pouring light that wouldn't stop, eyes blind, lips moving in words Nathan couldn't hear. The voice rolled again, shaking the sky until seams tore and eyes wept light. Choose, hollow one, break or bind, feed or fall. And in that moment, as the roots dragged him higher, as the tree's maw yawned to swallow them whole, Nathan understood. This wasn't about escape. This was about ending it or letting it spread, letting it spread. The roots coiled tighter, grinding into bone, slick with heat and pulse. Nathan could feel their rhythm, each throb in time with his heart, until he wasn't sure if the beating belonged to him. or the hollow itself. The sky above had torn wide. Now, a screaming wound spilling light that wasn't light. A pallid glow that crawled like worms across everything it touched. The stitched seams gaped, and from those rents hung strands of flesh like ribbons, whipping in the wind that had no source. And in the rifted firmament, the eyes blinked slow and wide, gazes sinking into him until his marrow felt scoured. Mara's voice was a ragged whisper under the thunder of the hum, and though Nathan couldn't make out words, he could taste their shape, bitter as ash. Her face was bone-pale, hollowed, veins bulging black against skin stretched to thin. The light pouring from her chest had begun to twist, bending into spirals that coiled upward toward the tree's gaping crown, every arc of it scorched. The marrow ground, leaving pits that steamed like open wounds. Caleb hung near, suspended in a tangle of roots that caressed him like a lover. He was half swallowed now, his legs fused into cords of tendon, his arms melting into the ropes that bound him. His head lolled, but his eyes God. His eyes still burned bright, twin suns drowning in black oceans. When they found Nathan, his ruined mouth stretched in a grin so wide it tore both cheeks to the hinge. "It's beautiful," he crooned, voice wet and bubbling. "You feel it, don't you? The weight of it, the truth." Nathan thrashed, roots cutting deeper with every jerk. Blood slicked his arms, his chest, but he didn't stop. He couldn't not while Mara still breathed, still hung there bleeding light like a candle guttering in a hurricane. "Stop fighting," Caleb hissed, voice splitting in a chorus not his own. "You'll tear before they do. Just stop. Go to hell," Nathan spat, tasting iron. Caleb's laugh broke like shattered glass. "Hello, Nate. There's no hell. There's this. There's always been this. Behind your walls. Under your skin this." The hum deepened, dropping into a pitch that made Nathan's teeth rattle. It crawled through his bones, unraveling strength until his muscles sagged, trembling. From the hole in the tree's crown came a sound like breathing, vast and slow, pulling the light from Mara in long ribbons that vanished into the black throat. And then, the voice, not sound. Not exactly. It spoke through every nerve, every blood vessel, until Nathan felt flayed from the inside. "You opened the door." He clenched his teeth, but his jaw moved without permission, his throat straining around words that weren't his. I didn't. You broke the seal. You fed the crack. You let the hollow taste you." Images rammed through his skull every moment since the first door. Every choice, every step dripping black behind him like a trail of rot. The motel room with the screaming walls, the river of teeth, the alley where Mara bled and begged him not to leave, all of it threads, knotted in a pattern too big for his mind to hold. 3 to bind, 1 to break, 1 to feed. Nathan shook his head, tears boiling hot down his cheeks. No, I didn't. 1 to feed." The roots shifted, jerking him higher until he dangled level with Mara. Her eyes fluttered, rolling toward him, glassy and milk-white. Her lips moved, cracking as they formed a single word. "Nate, God." That voice, thin as paper, shredded by pain, it gutted him, split him wide, because in that sound was everything he'd ever wanted. Her laughter on late nights, her breath warm against his neck, the way she said his name like it mattered. "I'm here," he choked, straining against the roots until tendons screamed. "I'm right here, baby." Her chest hitched, spilling more light. It hurt to look at her, hurt like staring into the heart of a furnace, but he didn't look away. Not when he'd spent years doing nothing but looking away. "You have to," she coughed, a wet rasp that sprayed threads of black. "End it." The words crawled through him, venom and salvation in one. He shook his head so hard his vision blurred. No, don't you dare say that. We're getting out. Both of us." Her smile broke him, small, soft, so damn tired. "There's no out." The tree groaned, a sound like mountains grinding. The roots riffed, lifting them toward the gaping maw above. Its teeth clicked, anticipation thrumming in the marrow of the world. The hanging bodies above twitched and jerked, spasms rattling their stitched limbs until threads snapped, and they plummeted like meat rain, bursting wet on the bone ground below. Each impact sent up fountains of black that hissed against the cold air, stinking of iron and rot. Caleb's voice crawled back, sweet as poison. "She's right, you know. There's no out. Just through." Let it take you. Let it fill you. Nathan's roar shredded his throat. He thrashed with everything left in him, blood slicking the roots, flesh tearing where bark tendon bit deep. And then he felt it, not strength, not hope. Something older, something in the cracks of him, the hollow places grief had carved. Clean. The hollow wasn't outside. It had been in him since the first door, since the first loss, the first night he curled in darkness wishing it would all just end. That was the truth, wasn't it? The hollow wasn't a place, it was a hunger, wearing shape like a mask, and he'd been feeding it for years, every broken promise, every betrayal, every time he chose running over staying. And now it wanted him. To finish the feast. Choose. The voice lashed through him, splitting thought from thought. Break or bind, feed or fall. The roots cinched tighter, hauling him level with Mara. He could feel her heat, the sear of her light blistering his face. She met his gaze, eyes wide now, wild with pain and clarity. Do it, she whispered. He broke, right there. He shattered, because he knew what she meant, and he couldn't, but he could. His scream tore the sky. He twisted hard, muscles tearing, and with a surge born of every drop of rage and grief left in him, he wrenched one arm free. Flesh peeled, bone cracked, but his hand was loose, slick with his own blood. He didn't think, didn't plan. He just reached, grabbed the jagged shard of bone jutting from the root beside him and drove it up into her chest. The world exploded, light ripped from her in a flood so blinding it turned the air to fire. The roots convulsed, recoiling like struck serpents, flinging them both free. Nathan fell, tumbling end over end through a storm of burning marrow, his skin sloughing in sheets. He hit hard, bone shattering under him, pain screaming white behind his eyes. But he didn't stop. He crawled blind, skinless, teeth bared in a rictus of agony toward the shape that was Mara. She was still glowing, not soft now, not human. Her body was a furnace, splitting along seams that poured rivers of brilliance. Her face was gone, burned to featureless light, but her voice, oh God, her voice rang clear in his head. Thank you. Then she blew apart. A sun went off inside the hollow. The sky tore end to end, seams unraveling in shrieks of ripping flesh. The tree convulsed, snapping branches, vomiting teeth and black gore. The maw in its crown slammed shut with a sound like the world breaking, sealing the light inside as it burned from root to rib. Shapes writhed in the distance, those tall, gliding horrors curling in on themselves, mouths snapping silent screams as the brilliance flayed them to nothing. Nathan crawled, lungs collapsing, eyes boiling in their sockets. The marrow ground split and heaved, spilling torrents of steaming black that swallowed everything in floods. His hand found purchase on a jut of bone, held as the tide roared past, searing his flesh to the white dot above. The light dimmed, faded, and in its place, silence. The hollow was closing. He rolled onto his back, staring at a sky gone dark, seams knitting slow, eyes winking out one by one. His chest hitched, every breath a blade. His body was ruined meat and bone and burned thread barely holding shape. But he smiled. God help him. He smiled. Because it was done, wasn't it? Something moved at the edge of his vision. He turned slow. So slow, and there was Caleb, crawling through the muck, half melted, half root. His grin still clinging like mold. You think you stopped it? He rasped, voice a shred of black silk. You didn't stop a damn thing. Doors swing both ways, Nate. And once you open one, Nathan dragged breath through torn lungs. Shut up. Caleb laughed, wet and gurgling, and then his body unraveled, threads of black rising like smoke before winking out. Nathan lay staring at the empty sky. Time slipped, hours, years, forever. Then dashed footsteps. Soft, bare, coming closer. He turned his head, and his heart broke all over again. Mara stood there, whole, smiling, eyes bright as they ever were. She reached out a hand, and he took it without thinking, tears cutting rivers through the ash on his face. When she pulled, it didn't feel like rising. It felt like falling. And then white, not light, not fire, just blank. Everything gone. And Nathan went with it. Nathan went with it. He woke to silence so deep it swallowed thought, a hush thick enough to feel like weight. No wind, no hum, no heartbeat, but his own, slow and ragged in the hollow of his chest. Nathan lay staring upward, expecting the seams, the dangling flesh of the sky, the blinking eyes that had watched him drown. But there was only gray aflat, endless pall stretched without contour or depth, not day, not night, just that dull between. He moved, or thought he did. His limbs felt distant, like echoes. And when his head turned, the horizon rolled but didn't change. It was all the same. Bone-white ground smooth as glass, vanishing into haze. The stink of marrow and blood was gone, scrubbed clean as if none of it had ever been real. Only the taste of ash on his tongue, metallic and cold, told him something had burned here once. Something vast. Memory came slow, trickling like oil through cracks in his skull. A tree that wasn't a tree. Its roots coiled through worlds, the hollow bodies swinging like meat in a butcher's dream. Mara God, Mara-bound and bleeding light, her voice breaking as she told him to end it. He remembered her face. No, not her face. Her glow burning him blind as his hands closed on bone. The thrust, the soundless scream that tore heaven into dot, and then nothing. Nathan sat up, though the motion felt strange, like strings tugging a puppet. His hands were whole, clean, no blood, no burns. He ran them over his chest, his face, tracing skin he shouldn't have any more. It was all there, even the scar on his shoulder from years ago, when life was small and ordinary, and the worst thing he feared was failure. He wanted to laugh. He wanted to scream. Both tangled in his throat and died there. Mara, he whispered, the name cracking. Like dry leaves. It vanished into the gray. He rose, or thought he did, and began to walk. There was no sense of time here, no markers, no shadow to track his steps. Just that flat light and the sound of nothing stretching in every direction. He walked until his legs burned, though they never tired. He walked until the question formed not, where am I? But am I? Because maybe that was the truth. The hollow hadn't ended. It had become. Or he had. Then he saw it. A line on the horizon, thin and dark, trembling in the shimmer of heatless air. His pace quickened, a flutter of something like hope stirring in the ruins of him. Closer. It became shaped vertical, narrow, standing alone. A door, just a door. Black, weathered. Its frame swallowed in nothing. No wall, no threshold. It stood. The way a wound stands, raw, waiting. Nathan stopped a dozen paces out. His heart had started to hammer now, hard enough to hurt. He knew this door. Not this exact one. Maybe, but all doors wore the same face in the end. It was how it started. It was how it all starts. 3 to bind, 1 to break, 1 to feed. The words crawled through him like rot blooming in old wood. His hands curled, nails biting his palms. And he wondered if they'd been there since the beginning. Not the doors, but the rule, the hunger, the hollow place under the skin that calls to something deeper than worlds. He turned, scanning the gray for another shape. A tree, a crack, a shadow, anything. There was nothing, just the door, waiting like an answer he didn't want. His breath shook out, fogging the air that didn't chill. He took one step, then another, until his fingers brushed the wood. It was warm to warm, like skin stretched over bone. Nathan closed his eyes. Behind them, Mara's smile bloomed, small, tired, bright enough to blind. He held onto it until the ache made him shake. I'm sorry, he whispered, though he didn't know who he was saying it to. Her, himself, the world he gutted with his hands. Then he turned the handle. It opened like a mouth. Later, though, time meant nothing. He woke again, not in the gray, not in the hollow, in a bed. White sheets, clean and crisp, sunlight pouring through gauzy curtains, painting the walls gold. The hum of life outside, cars, birds, the rise and fall of voices. He sat up slow, waiting for the burn, the split, the roots to drag him down again. But nothing came. His body was whole, his clothes soft, simple, not his. There was a glass of water on the nightstand, a clock ticking steady on the wall. For a moment, a cruel, perfect moment. He believed in waking, in miracles, in the idea that sometimes horror ends and life begins again. He drank the water. It was cold, clean. He touched the sheets, the wood grain of the nightstand, the sun-warmed floor. Then he saw the door, across the room, plain, white, closed. His breath stopped, and from somewhere deep, not outside, not above, but in the black coil behind his ribs came the whisper, "One to feed." Nathan stared at the door until the sun went out. There are endings that aren't endings, only circles folding in on themselves. Maybe he saved her. Maybe he damned them both. Maybe the hollow burns still. Roots sunk through every crack in the world, feeding on choices dressed as mercy. He doesn't know. He will never know. All he knows is this: doors swing both ways, and once you open one, it never really closes.